Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Whitney O'Reilly. I help run our estate department here at Cohen Seglias. I have been doing estate work for about a decade now. This is the first webinar I am doing at my house. So if there's any glitches, any issues, please let me know. I do have IT on board in case there's anything that's going on. But bear with me if my face is in the wrong place or there's a little delay as I'm using Wi-Fi at my home. Obviously, we all know that there is still a stay-at-home order here in Pennsylvania. But I wanted to reach out to my clients, to my friends, to my family members, and give you an estate update regarding COVID-19 and your estate. I want to today talk to you about the 5 most important takeaways from recent legislation. So many of you on this call today have been on webinars before. There's a chat box on the side. If you have any questions, please type them in. If I see them, I will certainly try to answer those questions. If I don't get to it or I think it's something too specific, I will certainly reach out to you afterwards. This is a very quick webinar, so we're not going to go into too much detail. I want to give you some really good takeaways. And if you listen really carefully, you might win a prize at the end. I know a lot of you have joined my webinars before. I try to do a lunch and learn each and every month. So I appreciate you coming back. I wish I could see you all. I wish I could give you all a hug. But I'm so glad that you gave me an opportunity to put some earrings on and get out of my pajamas. So let's get started learning a little bit about what is going on in the middle of this pandemic related to your estate. So of course, here's my information. Please do check out Cohen Seglias' webpage. All of my webinars are recorded. We have many webinars about all things related to the pandemic, related to business interests, construction. So check out our website. If you're home and you have some free time, grab a drink, grab a coffee, and sit and peruse all the information that we have there for you. And again, you can reach out to us at any time. My contact information will be on the bottom of this, but you can always reach out to Cohen Seglias as well. So I told you a little bit about myself, that I'm an estate attorney. I've been practicing for 10 years. So I do estate planning work. I draft last wills and testaments, financial power of attorney, medical power of attorney, living wills. When someone passes away, I help administer the estate. We file tax returns. When we have trust involved with family members or businesses, I get involved and sometimes have to go to court for those. I also deal with business succession planning and business interest of varying matters regarding all sorts of transactional issues related to buying and selling real estate or buying and selling your business. So let's get started and let's move ourselves out of Pennsylvania, out of the United States, and to WUHAN, China, that meat market. I'm sure a lot of you know a lot about the coronavirus. But we're going to start this webinar off talking about it because it's really led to what legislation has come out and what that means for us in this continuing world. So we're starting with, this is where we think the virus started, in WUHAN, China. You can see in this picture, I pulled this off the internet, so it may not even be WUHAN, China, but the internet said it was, so we're going to believe it. You're going to see in this picture, you see some live animals. That's where they think the coronavirus maybe spread to humans, maybe came from a bat or transferred to a snake or a frog. And so you can see here in China, they have these open air markets, and unfortunately, they're very loosely regulated. So we can be thankful here in the United States, we have a lot more food regulation. And so something like this picture probably couldn't happen. We've got live frogs, and we have a man slaughtering a frog, I think, for somebody waiting to take those home. But it doesn't look like a very cleanly environment to me. Anyway, this was the beginning of the coronavirus. Now, it's important to understand that this isn't the only coronavirus. I think there's more than 200 different kinds. We have seen these kind of viruses in the past spread from bats. I think there was a case regarding SARS that it might have spread from a camel. So this has certainly happened before. But let's look at a timeline, because when we look at the legislation and how it affects our state, this has all happened very quickly. And you're going to hear from me in a few minutes. I found out more information than when I did yesterday for these slides. So things are ever changing. So depending on the information that I give you, make sure you reach out to your tax team, reach out to your attorney, reach out to your accountant, and make sure that the things that I'm saying to you now are still in full force and effect, because things are ever changing right now. So let's start with December 1st, 2019. That's where in Wuhan, China, we have our first laboratory confirmed case of the infection. Then we fast forward to January 20th, and Washington State was the first state to have someone diagnosed with the coronavirus. It was a gentleman, he was in his 30s, and he had come home from a trip from Wuhan, China. So we go from December to January. Now it has spread from China here into the United States, and now it's starting to spread across the world to Japan, South Korea, Thailand. January 30th, the World Health Organization finally says it is a public health emergency of international concern. Mid-February, in France, we have the first death of coronavirus in Europe. And last month, so March, we have started to see nationwide lockdowns across the world, unprecedented. I don't know about you, but I have never experienced being in a stay-at-home order in the middle of a pandemic. So lots of things are very new to a lot of us. Now, by the mid to end of March, last month, President Trump declares a national emergency. By March 23rd, Thomas Wolf declares his first stay-at-home order for Pennsylvania. And as of yesterday, I just want to fill you in on the cases. As of yesterday, the CDC reports globally almost 2.5 million cases of the coronavirus, which is also, people call it COVID-19, and about 160,000 deaths. In the United States alone, we have about 750,000 cases and about 40,000 deaths in 55 jurisdictions. In Pennsylvania, where I'm located, Cohen Seglias, we service an awful lot of states. I work in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, sometimes a little bit in New York. But here in Pennsylvania, we've got 32,000 cases of the coronavirus confirmed and a little more than 1,100 deaths. So we've got a lot of things going on with this virus right now. But let's talk about the legislative impact that the coronavirus has had on our estate. So first, I want to give you my first takeaway. Remember, there's going to be 5 takeaways today. The first takeaway is pretty simple. We all know this one. We've learned it since we were a little kid. But let's wash our hands. Let's keep the germs off of ourselves and other people. When I was young, my grandfather was a doctor, and I remember watching him wash his hands. And it was this beautiful dance he did for a long period of time. And it has certainly reminded me that I could spend a little longer in the bathroom washing my hands each time I need to wash them. So the first takeaway, nothing regarding estate, nothing regarding legal work, but just a helpful reminder. We know a little bit about the background of the pandemic. I'm sure all of you know a whole lot more than just that simple timeline that I gave you. But it's important to understand that backdrop for why we have the legislation that we have and why it is continuing to move and why we don't always exactly know the answer to something. So now let's dive into the CARES Act. This is actually the 3rd round of legislation since, I want to say, February or March regarding this pandemic. So this isn't even the first piece of legislation that's come out of it, but it is the 3rd round. And it's called the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. And that is known as the CARE Act. and President signed it into law on March 27th, so not even 4 weeks ago, following approval, obviously, by both houses of Congress. So what is this? The act is aimed at reducing the economic impact of COVID-19, and it's authorizing more than $2 trillion in aid to various sectors of the economy. This legislation is 880 pages long. I have not read every page, but I have read a varying degree of those pages to better understand this legislation so that I can help people like you, my clients, navigate this new world we find ourselves in. And so what is this largest aid package in U.S. history meant for? Well, it's meant for relief for individual taxpayers, distressed industries. My husband has his own business in Philadelphia. That stay-at-home order has certainly made it so that we are not able to operate at the capacity that we were operating before. And what do we do about that? What does this CARES Act do for us? And of course, it's to relieve the healthcare sector, among other things. And you'll see at the bottom of this screen, you're going to see the coronavirus. You see the crown caps. That's part of the reason it has that name. It fascinates me that this tiny virus can cause this much upheaval in such a short period of time. So it's just amazing to me that this has unfolded and unfolded as quickly as it has. So now let's talk about some of the main provisions of the CARES Act. So first, a lot of people probably know a lot about this first one. A lot of people call it the PPP loans. This is the Paycheck Protection Program. These are loans for small businesses, normally under 500 employees, but it could also depend on how many employees are part of that employment. In certain cases, it can actually be more employees than that qualify for this. And it's for operating costs, and there could be full or partial forgiveness. The interest rate can't be more than 4%. There is a deferral of loan payments between 6 months to a year. And if you use these loans for the right thing, then you might not have to pay back all of it, or at least not have to pay back some of it. There's also other SBA loans, loan guarantees, other investments for businesses, states and municipalities. We've got other SBA loans, things that are trying to help keep the air industry alive. I know somebody had told me, I don't know if this is on the news or not, that Blue Angels are going to fly across the skies of Philadelphia at 1:45 or 2. So if you have the opportunity, go outside and maybe see a show. And that leads into some money for national defense. Then we see these business and individual tax provisions. Again, I'm glossing over these gently. If there's something that affects you or your family, you have to look more into this. You'll have to reach out to me. You'll have to reach out to your tax team. You'll have to reach out to your advisors to say, I've listened to this webinar. I've gotten a few takeaways. Tell me a little bit more about what other loans are out there for my business. What other things can I utilize as an individual from this CARES Act? So for businesses, we've got this loss limitation has been loosened so that we can use more losses. I'm not so sure that's going to help businesses with cash flow needs at the moment, but it can certainly be helpful. The same, a lot of people have already received the cash. I think it was $1,200, $500 for each additional dependent. Just remember it tops out at a certain point. If you make too much money, you could be receiving less or none. I think for a jointly filing married couple, it's if you make more than $195,000. But follow up. If you haven't gotten that check, if you haven't got it direct deposited, certainly look back. They're also allowing individuals to claim more charitable deductions. So even in this time of sort of mass hysteria and sadness and confusion, we can do something good If we already have less income, to reduce our income even more, maybe we utilize some of these charitable deductions that they have allowed. And then remember, we all know this. This is actually my birthday. I'm a tax attorney. Taxes are normally due on April 15th. That's not always the case for businesses, but it has now been deferred to July 15th, and that's including payment. So we're not just deferring the deadline to file the taxes, but you don't have to actually pay the tax either. Just remember, if you file on a quarterly tax basis, you still owe the next quarter at June 15th, not July 15th. Now, again, maybe things will change and they push that back, but just keep that in mind. There is retirement provisions. That's really the meat of what we're going to talk about today, so we're going to get to that on the next slide. Pension-related provisions. Just if you're providing a pension, you're able to stall and fund that over a longer period of time, although interest does accrue. Bank regulatory provisions. This is a way for our banks to be a little bit more liquid, be able to lend more money to more people. So if you're a bank or an institution and you're not sure if you meet some of these qualifications, certainly reach out to us so that we can get as much money out to as many people as we possibly can to start, bringing the economy back to where it was before. We all get some credit protection. So if you are in a situation where you can't pay your bills, you're trying to forego, we're going to talk about student loans and mortgage loans, just know that there is some protection for those things going to credit bureaus at this particular time. Remember, all of this legislation is meant to defer everything for a little bit of time, basically pause the world now for a couple of months so that everybody can get back on their feet. So that's sort of the crux of this whole legislation. Student loan provisions. This is a great one for people like me. I have gone to college. I've gone to law school. I have gotten an estate planning certificate at a law school, and I have gotten a master's degree in taxation. So I have a varying number of student loans. This is letting us know that student loans don't have to be paid back till September. Those payments don't have to be resumed till September 30th, 2020, and there is no interest accrual. Just remember, it's only the federal loans. So if you have something like Sallie Mae loans, that may not be the case. So you'll have to investigate your particular loan situation, or certainly reach out to us and we can help you figure out the answers to your individual situation. And then the last provision that I'm going to talk about is patent and trademark provisions. Again, same thing as I've been saying over and over again. We're just trying to extend deadlines. Right now, with courts closed, no one really knows what's going on with certain deadlines, statutes tolling. And so more and more legislation is coming out to say, we didn't say anything before, nobody knew what was going on, but now for patent and trademarks, we are suspending some of those deadlines and modifying those deadlines in light of what's happening in the world at the moment. So those are the big provisions of the CARES Act. And again, remember, this just came out a couple of weeks ago. I know my husband's business, we applied for the PPP loans, and we have now gotten them in. But it's still some work to work with us, with the team, to make sure that what you're using this money for is appropriate. And so that's my second takeaway. First, of course, wash those hands. But the second takeaway here today is the CARES Act may benefit you. I've given you a very quick overview of some of the main provisions of the CARES Act, but you're going to want to investigate. Reach out to your accountant, reach out to your attorney, reach out to your advisors to say, I've listened to this webinar. I know a little bit about this new legislation. Tell me a little bit about what else is there for my business during this particular time. So it's just important to know that there's another piece of legislation out there that could benefit you, your family, or your business. And so now we're going to talk about how this legislation really affects your retirement account. So here I've just listed again those different topics, different main provisions of the CARES Act that could help you. There's business loans, there's individual money, there's cash that could actually go into, there's individual and business incentives, different tax breaks that you can utilize. There's a lot of credit protection for any of my clients who own real estate, who rent out businesses, who rent rental units. Really important to understand what you're allowed and what you're not allowed to do right now regarding when people don't pay their bills and evictions. So certainly reach out to us if you're experiencing anything like that. Again, mortgage forbearance. If you had a federally backed mortgage, you might be able to get a forbearance for a period of time. And again, we talked about those student loan deferrals. So now let's dive into retirement accounts. As an estate attorney, I have drafted thousands of estate plans in about a decade that I have been working. And one of the biggest assets in my hundreds of estate administrations is people's retirement accounts. They pass away with many millions of dollars in their retirement account. So this is a really important component of your estate. For estate planning purposes, and we're going to talk about this in a few minutes, we actually had some legislation come out right in December that came into effect in 2020 that really changed the landscape of how you can utilize retirement accounts in estate planning. But now we've got even more legislation telling us different rules about retirement accounts. So I'm sure everyone on this call has a retirement account. You might be like me. You might have a little bit left in your retirement account than you did a few months ago, but it is starting to creep back up. So hopefully it'll get back to where it was before and continue to grow. But important to understand a little bit how a retirement account works. I've done previous webinars, so feel free to check it out if you want to know a little bit more about retirement accounts and how they work. But for the first thing that the CARES Act does regarding your retirement accounts is, normally, right now, I am not 59 and a half. So if I want to take money out of my retirement account, I can, but I have to pay a penalty and I have to pay income tax on that distribution. So what the CARES Act did was removed that withdrawal penalty and said you can make a distribution up to $100,000 in 2020. There are a couple caveats. You either need to have been diagnosed with COVID-19, you need to have a close family member who has it as a spouse or a dependent, or, and this is the big catch-all for all of us or anyone who doesn't have COVID-19 or someone in their house that has COVID-19, it's anyone who experiences an adverse financial consequence as a result of being quarantined, furloughed, laid off, having your work hours reduced due to the virus, or closing or reducing hours of businesses owned or operated by the individual due to the virus. So what this says is, if you need to get to a pot of money to get through a couple of weeks, and you've got a retirement account like me sitting there with $1.5 million in it, my husband has a business that is hurting. What if we didn't get the PPP loans? Maybe we'd have to invade my retirement account that has $1.5 million in it and use use $100,000 of it in order to continue paying payroll or keep the business afloat. So again, this is just allowing you to invade your retirement accounts if you were before 59 and a half without having to pay a penalty. Just be aware, any money that gets taken out of your retirement account, you will pay income tax on. Now, that's not the way it works for a Roth retirement account. So just keep in mind, if it's a Roth, it means you've already paid tax on it. So you won't pay income tax on it. But the CARES Act actually does something else beneficial. If I do take that $100,000 out and I do have to pay income tax on it, it is spreading that income tax consequence over the next 3 years. So it's not as big of a burden to take that money out. Again, the government's trying to make it easier for us all to get to any pot of money we can that could benefit us during this difficult time. Now, is it the best idea to take money out of your retirement account now? even with these updates in the CARES Act? I don't know. It depends on your particular situation. If it's something you have to do, make sure you reach out to your advisors first and say, is this the best pot of money to go to? And what are the ramifications of doing this? The legislation has also allowed you to pay this money back over a 3-year period of time. So we can take out $100,000, use it, pay just a little bit of income tax over a 3-year period, and then stick it all back in. And it's not going to affect the account caps. Because remember, or go and check out another webinar of mine, there are certain limits to how much you can put in your retirement accounts each year. They say that if you're paying this money back, you don't have to worry about that. In addition to taking out this large sum of money from your retirement account, removing that withdrawal, being able to pay it back and having a little bit less of an income tax consequence, you're also able to borrow from your retirement account. Maybe you don't want to take money out of the retirement account, but you just need a little bit of money to float you a few more weeks until things get back up and running. This says that you can. There's a formula. You'll see it here on the screen for how to know how much to take out. But it's a small amount, about $10,000 or a little bit less. But important to know that you can take out a loan for a little bit of money from your retirement account as well. And then it is also extending the due dates for any other outstanding loans you have from your retirement accounts that would otherwise be due in 2020 for a whole year. So really helpful that this large pot of money that often before you are a certain age, you can't really get access to or utilize. Right now, the government has lifted a lot of those restrictions to say, if you need to go to that pot of money, you can. And we're going to try to make it as easy as possible to get money from it. And we're going to try to make it as easy as possible for you to put it back with as little downside as humanly possible. At the same time, they're allowing people not to have to take required minimum distributions. So if you remember from another webinar, or just know because you're a certain age, or just understand how retirement accounts work, we get to put money into these retirement accounts pre-tax, but it's not no tax. So at some point, the government wants the tax from your account. So when you reach a certain age, you have to start taking this thing called required minimum distributions. It's based on your life expectancy. There is calculations for how to determine it in the Internal Revenue Code. But once you reach a certain age, you have to take these required minimum distributions. Or if you inherit a retirement account from someone, you have to take required minimum distributions. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about a different piece of legislation that changed some of the rules regarding that. But if you have an inherited retirement account, you probably are taking required minimum distributions unless you meet some very small exceptions. And so what this legislation, what the CARES Act says is, not only can you take money out of your retirement account if you want, you can also get a loan from your retirement account. You can also pay income tax over a greater period of time, and we won't penalize you if you put it all back. We're also saying if you don't want to take money out of your retirement account because you don't want to pay income tax on it right now, and your account is so much smaller than it was, you don't want to take any money out of it, it says for 2020, you don't have to. And if you already have, you can put it back. So again, these required minimum distributions, they're waiving that for 2020. So this is our third takeaway. Remember, the first takeaway, wash those hands because we've got a nasty virus floating around. The second takeaway is that we can utilize all the provisions of the CARES Act. Look and see if it benefits you. Now I've told you a little bit about the main provisions. Do any of those provisions look like they could apply to you? Reach out to your advisors, reach out to your attorneys, reach out to your accountants and say, does this CARES Act do something that I can utilize? And then we get to the third takeaway, which is we can utilize our retirement accounts. We can make withdrawals from those accounts. We can take a loan from that account. And we can waive the required minimum distributions. So we might have to dive into that piggy bank because of the way that things are going right now with the economy not fully started. Although there is, it looks like, passing legislation in this state and other states in other countries that look like things are being lifted. I don't have a crystal ball to know when that's going to be and what that's going to look like. But at some point, these stay-at-home orders and only essential businesses functioning is going to be lifted in some capacity. So hopefully we can patch back those piggy banks and our retirement accounts can start to grow again. So now let's talk about, we've talked about the coronavirus. Just a little background that it didn't start till December of 2019, only a few short months ago. It has kind of wreaked havoc on the world. Some people think it's wreaked more havoc, and some people think it's wreaked less havoc. But in any event, it has certainly caused a global crisis of a pretty sizable proportion. Lots of legislation has been rolling out. Lots of statutes and different things have been lifted in light of all of this. And this piece of legislation, the CARES Act, has a lot of things that you could utilize, including your own retirement account. And while we're talking about retirement accounts, because they're such a big part of our estate plan, is right before this all happened, or right at the beginning of it happening, in December 19th, 2019, the Secure Act was passed. Oh, I'm sorry. The Secure Act was passed, which was setting every community up for retirement enhancement. It's a lot of things to help people save for retirement, which we're certainly going to need even more now than ever, especially if we're going and taking money out of our retirement accounts. We're going to have even less saved for retirement. But what the Secure Act did was it took away the IRA stretch. So we talked a little already today about required minimum distribution. It did increase the age. Normally you have to start taking required minimum distributions if you are 70 and a half, or if you have inherited an IRA, as in someone has passed away and left you money in a retirement account, you're going to have to take those required minimum distributions, whether it is traditional or Roth. And they've moved that age up to 72. So that you can continue putting money into those retirement accounts and you don't have to take it out for longer. But they really removed the stretch provisions of your retirement accounts. The life expectancy used to be for all beneficiaries full lifetime. So I utilize this in estate planning quite a bit. I'll give you an example. My husband and I have wills. We have 2 young children. If something were to happen to both of us, I have something called a minor's trust underneath my will. And that's where I had our large retirement accounts going, although slightly smaller. I'd like to say still somewhat large. Our retirement accounts were going in trust for the protection of our children. I'll certainly do another webinar on the benefits of trust and how you can utilize them in your estate plan. But could be really important if you have minor children. If you don't have a minor's trust, you should have a minor's trust. But the way that this was drafted before 2020 worked a certain way. And with the passage of the Secure Act, most of these trusts, so if you have an estate plan before January 1st, 2020, and it has a trust, either a revocable trust or a trust underneath your last will and testament, it probably will not work the way that it was supposed to work and could actually cause an adverse tax consequence, which is bad. We want as much money as possible to go to our children. And the reason that I'm talking about this is because they're listing some regulations regarding executing estate planning documents so that we can go back and update these or update the beneficiary designations. All you have time at home and you are cleaning out your desk or you're cleaning out your office, go back and look at your estate plan, look at your beneficiary designations, and make sure they say what they should say in light of all this new legislation. Maybe we don't have much left in our retirement accounts. Maybe they shouldn't go to a standalone IRA trust. Maybe we have a trust that was drafted a long time ago and it's accounting for a different distribution scheme. Right now, anyone besides your spouse has to take a payout, take required minimum distributions within 10 years of getting that retirement account. It used to be able to be your entire lifetime. So it's really changed the landscape for how we tell clients to plan for retirement benefits transferring to their loved ones. There are eligible designated beneficiaries. Minor children still get that life expectancy until they reach the age of majority. If there is someone who's incapacitated, they'll get it until they become not incapacitated or the rest of their life if they are permanently incapacitated. And someone who is close in age to you within 10 years, normally meant for a sibling. Otherwise, everybody has this payout within a few short years. So due to the CARES Act and what we can do with our retirement accounts and the Secure Act, which came into effect January 1st, 2020, just a few months ago, it has really changed the landscape of how we can plan for our retirement accounts in retirement and after we pass away. So this is really important. We've got takeaway 1, right? Wash those hands. Takeaway 2, just know that there's the CARES Act out there, a piece of legislation that could benefit you. Look at some of those main provisions. If something looks like it would apply to you, reach out to your advisors and say, what can help me? Of course, 3, we can utilize those retirement accounts. We can take money out of them without a penalty. We can take a loan out against them. We can put the money back in without as much income tax consequence. But unfortunately, because of the Secure Act that came out right before this legislation, we all really need to go back and look at our beneficiary designations. Is the beneficiary that we have in place the best beneficiary in light of the Secure Act and the CARES Act? This is something that we can do at home. When I'm thinking to myself, what can I tell my clients to do? Even though we can't get together in person, what is something that you could be doing now to help yourself and your family members for retirement or after you pass away? And let's go back. Look at those beneficiary designations of your retirement accounts, your life insurance. See how you hold title to your assets, and then reach out to your attorney and say, is this the way that it's supposed to be in light of the Secure Act, the CARES Act? Have I maximized all the benefits that I can possibly get for myself and my family members now and in the future? So this next piece that we're going to talk about is how Pennsylvania, we've talked about the CARES Act that affects the entire United States. We've talked about the Secure Act, which affects the entire United States. And now we're going to specifically talk about Pennsylvania, but I want you to know if you are listening from another close by state, most of those states also have this type of lifting of restrictions happening, which is that most of our legal documents require notarization, and Pennsylvania has now suspended that statute regarding physical notarization and has allowed e-notarization in some circumstances. When I was preparing these slides, that was the case. I actually think something has passed within the last 48 hours that it might not only affect estate matters, but real estate matters as well. The state understands that attorneys like me are being inundated with calls and concerns from our clients, from family members, from friends saying, I have an estate plan, but it needs to be updated, or I never did an estate plan and I'm an essential business and I'm still working. I need a will. I need a financial power of attorney document. I need something in place. So this legislation has made it that much easier so that we can go back. I think we're, I don't know if we're out of time. I'm just so excited to get to talk to everybody. We're all a little bit alone, even if we're with our families. We're missing seeing colleagues, coworkers, clients. Certainly feel free to hop off, but in just a minute, there will be a prize. Let me just explain to you, an estate plan normally includes a last will and testament, a financial power of attorney, a medical power of attorney, and living will. And some of these things require notarization, and some of them don't. So here's a list of those documents. You actually don't need notarization for a last will and testament in Pennsylvania. A self-executing will does, but you can actually sign a will with just 2 witnesses. There are some things that would happen after you passed away, so it's not best practice to do that, but you could. A financial power of attorney and some guardianships, yes, do require notarization. Your medical power of attorney and living will and some other forms of guardianship don't require that notarization. But it's really important to understand, even with this listing of legislation, I've had a lot of attorneys reach out to me and say, Whitney, you do this work all the time. I don't understand. They've lifted some of these requirements for in-person notarization to e-notarization, which Cohen Seglias has the capabilities to do. But we still need witnesses involved. And I'll tell you, everybody, on this webinar, I have now done dozens of estate planning initial meetings and signing appointments, all through Zoom or conference calls. And people have gotten very creative on how witnesses can sign the documents. Sometimes it's business owners who are still in business, so they have a notary and witnesses to sign these documents. Some people have a neighbor come over and sign it in the driveway. Some people go to their bank. There are still notary services. There are remote notary services as well. So just know this is the 5th takeaway, which is get your estate plan in place. And if you have it in place, go back and look at it and make sure that it does what you want it to do. Remember, there's lots of recent legislation that has changed the way that your estate plan works. And this is just a funny cartoon that says Mr. Scott left his last will and testament in these fortune cookies. In the decade that I've been doing this work, I have probated holographic wills. That means a will that is handwritten. I have probated a napkin. I have probated a last will and testament that was charred and half destroyed in a fire. What I can say is you don't want any of those to be the case. You want to have an estate plan in place that protects you during your lifetime, allows somebody to step in and help run your business if you're not able to do it, if you're in the hospital on a ventilator. You want the right people in place to make medical decisions for you. I can't tell you how many times I have clients call me in an emergency-like situation. We pull out these documents, and the agents that they have in place are no longer living or are no longer the people that they want to be acting in that place. So that 5th takeaway is you can execute your estate plan now. You can update those documents. Feel free to reach out to me, reach out to your estate attorney, but know that there are things that you can be doing here at home. So I'm just going to remind you those 5 takeaways. I'm going to ask you one last question. The first person to answer that question in the chat box, I am going to send a $25 Amazon gift card. So remember that first takeaway is wash our hands. Second takeaway is the CARES Act may have something that benefits me. The third takeaway is that my retirement account may be an asset that I can use at this particular time with not that much penalty involved. The fourth takeaway is that I need to go and look at my beneficiary designations to make sure I've got the right people in place. Or if I have an estate plan, I go back and look at it as this 5th takeaway. Go back and look at your estate plan and update it if necessary. So now we're going to get to, I'm just pulling up the chat box, and I'm going to flip the slide to the next page. I'm going to ask you this question, and the first person to get this question right is going to win a $25 gift card. In these very troubling times, it is always good to do something that puts a smile on somebody's face. So here we go. Trivia question is, if you are 74 years old, do you have to take a required minimum distribution this year in 2020? And I'm just pulling up this chat box. Oh, I don't know what I just did. Looks like we've got a bunch of people typing all at the same time. Great, I have got a winner. So no, you do not have to take required minimum distributions because of the CARES Act that was just passed in March, a few short weeks ago. The Secure Act changed the time that you had to start taking required minimum distributions from 70 and a half to 72. But now, because of the CARES Act, even if you're older than 72 and are required to take those required minimum distributions, you don't have to in 2020. If you've already done that, reach out to your tax team for how you can put it back without any penalty. I'm just looking to see if there's any other questions here that I haven't answered as we've gone through this. Just remember, if there's a question that you have that I haven't gotten to, I'm certainly going to look at this at the end and get back to you. This is the very end of the webinar on 5 takeaways for recent legislation regarding your estate. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time if you have a question about anything that I talked to you about today. I have been doing estate work for about a decade now. I am always happy to answer your questions, to work with you in any capacity. Feel free to check out Cohen Seglias' website. You'll see this recorded webinar if you want to go back and look at the slides. Again, email, call me anytime you would like. I appreciate you taking this time out of your day, lunchtime, to sit and chat with me a little bit about estate in general and legislation, something that normally bores us all quite a little bit, but really important to understand, because if there's things out there that can help you and your family, I want to share that information with my clients, with my family, with my friends, with everybody here on this call, because it's so important that we all get as much as we possibly can out of these recent pieces of legislation. Well, thank you all for joining me. I appreciate you being on the call. We have a huge amount today, which was wonderful, and I look forward to seeing you all next month. Like I said, I do this once a month, so I look forward to seeing you again in May. May we be able to say in May that we are all out and about and can maybe even, you know, give each other a high five at some time soon. So again, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me, and thank you again for joining me on this webinar. I hope you got a few takeaways from it, and I look forward to seeing you once this is all finished. Thanks, everyone.